Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We continue today as we begin to come to the close of this series over the next few weeks, endeavoring to prepare ourselves for this service of thinking the teachings into the minds of humanity, ideas that transmit divine ideals. Master Dwal Kul tells us that this is indeed a service and an important one. And we might say even more important now as we are in this 500-year transition period and this culminating year of the Great Conclave 2025, as the plan begins to become clear for the externalization of the hierarchy in the ways in which the hierarchy guides humanity. But the plan is to be accomplished by humanity. So we endeavor to fit ourselves for this service, while at the same time mastering the techniques of indifference, the technique of light, and the technique of the presence. For the technique of indifference results in true indifference to the etheric physical plane and true impersonality. The technique of light results in freedom from the astral light and the astral plane and the illusions of the astral plane that are dominating humanity at this time. And the technique of the presence, which results in freedom from illusions and the pull of the lower concrete mind, distorting the divine ideals. All as we prepare to receive what was predicted to be by Master Dwal Kul, the next great teaching that is to guide for the next 100 or more years of the Aquarian age. We know that we are not able to do this easily or instantaneously in this world of continually growing challenges. And one of the major challenges that many disciples and initiates are now dealing with is this whole idea of intelligence and what is noted to be artificial intelligence that is now beginning to spread to dominate conversations about how we think as humanity and how we formulate ideas and formulate thought forms of solution. So in closing out this series and this cycle, today we'll look at again the rules for thought. But let's first align. Each of us on the inhalation and exhalation that connects us with the physical etheric world through our bodies, uniting us with all of the world through the breath, through the inhalation of oxygen and the exhalation of carbon dioxide. We fuel the life in the body through all the circulatory and other systems and create through that rhythm an ease and an effortless detachment, knowing that the body is sustained and that the mind is fed as the brain is found to be enlivened by this rhythm of breathing. And we raise our consciousness from that point of life in the heart center to the point of consciousness in the head center, linking those two centers and envisioning on the screen of the mind the beauty of that dual light, and call forth the light of the soul as you sound, I am a point of light within a greater light. I am a strand of loving energy within the stream of love divine. I am a point of sacrificial fire focused within the fiery will of God, and thus I stand. I am a way by which men may achieve. I am a source of strength enabling them to stand. I am a beam of light shining upon their way, and thus I stand. And standing thus, revolve and tread this way the ways of men, and know the ways of God, and thus I stand. Let's remember what we are told by Master Dwal Kul, that between the techniques, the technique of indifference, the technique of light, and the technique of the presence, lie no lines, no real lines of demarcation, but only a constant overlapping, a cyclic development, and a process of fusion. Just as the result of innate reaction to environment produces the apparatus needed to contact that environment, so the unfoldment of the powers which these techniques serve produces modes of contact with soul and spiritual environments. Each of these techniques is related to a new environment. Each of them develops power in the initiate or disciple, which can be used in the service of humanity and in the higher spheres of divine activity. Breathe into that duality. From the great duplicity of the three techniques, the environment of the physical etheric plane, the environment of the astral, and the environment of the mental, we develop powers that can be used first in service of humanity and simultaneously and cyclically in the higher spheres of divine activity. Each is related to the other techniques, and each releases the disciple into a conscious relationship with a new environment, new states of awareness, and new fields of service. And therefore, we have the problem of all disciples, and it remains the same. This is to live simultaneously the acutely sensitive inner life of the pilgrim upon the path of life and of a human being in the world of human events. That duality. To live the group life of the pledged disciple and the mass life of humanity. Another way of expressing that great duality. And to fulfill each of us our own spiritual destiny through the medium of a controlled personality, and at the same time to participate fully in the life of humanity upon earth. This is no easy task. And now, as we are in the sign of Virgo, noting that this came from esoteric astrology, it's time for us to think not as individuals in terms of our own charts, what we know of as natal charts or progressed charts of our own birth time, astrological influences, but to hold those and those interpretations in a new way, and simultaneously hold the great influences that are coming through astrologically for humanity as a whole. For Master DK tells us that there is a new astrology, and that astrology is based on the science of relationships, the science of triangles, the science of centers, and the science of esoteric understanding. And we know that this esoteric understanding is evolving. And we are beginning to merge and blend the esoteric teachings of the past, preparing a new field, a higher field of consciousness for receptivity to those divine ideals that will come through as higher ideas into and through the new group of world servers, which we now call the One World Serving Group. So let us not be confused by what sometimes is sounded as a kind of cacophony of ideas and thoughts that are expressed. And utilize these next few weeks together to come up with an approach using the three techniques so that we can prepare to be of use in bringing new thoughts into the field of human consciousness. So assume the attitude of the observer and envision your etheric body, your aura, your health aura, and your astral emotional aura, and your mental aura, encapsulating your entire expressed etheric radiance and your place upon the path of evolution, your personality instrument. See these spheres, these auras, as a unity. Now imagine the interconnections, the elemental and the Devic streams flowing in each of the spheres as that unity, relating, connecting these auras in a single, unified personality field, and sound the words of Roberto Assagioli. I have a body, I am not my body. I have emotions, I am not my emotions. I have a mind, I am not my mind. Now lift the attention within these spheres to the highest point, the deepest point of life within your being, the soul, and say, I am the soul. I am light divine. I am love. I am will. I am fixed design. Sound an Om, a silent Om. But we must consider mind as mind relates to soul. In the Yoga Sutras, the mind is relegated simply to the position of an instrument, of an intermediary, and of a sensitive plate. So envision your mind as that intermediary, and lift that mind consciousness to the abstract mind where the soul vehicle is located. Realizing you're registering either that which pours into it from above or that which affects it from below. Visualizing this sensitive plate. It has no personality of its own. It has no life or light of its own, except that light which is inherent in all substance, and therefore to be found in the atoms which constitute the mind stuff. These atoms, being along the same evolutionary line as the rest of the lower nature, swell the tide of material forces which seeks to hold the soul prisoner and constitute the great illusion. So visualize again your mind, the concrete mind, which we call the lower mind, and the abstract mind, the soul vehicle, which some call the egoic lotus. It is truly, as DK says, vortices that are opening or are open to the higher. So the mind, therefore, can be cognized in two directions. First, it can be known, recognized, and seen by the thinker, the soul on its own plane. And that is a technique we use in the technique of light, where we link the light of the soul, and the soul then comes into contact and then becomes fused with the light of mind and the light of the brain substance. And it can be seen and known as the vehicle of the man or woman on the physical plane. For a long time, DK says, we become that which we identify ourselves with, to the exclusion of the spiritual man. And as we look out across humanity today, we see that man who can be known, contacted, and obeyed, once the mind is relegated to its rightful place as an instrument of knowledge. And this is occurring in a way today that it has never really occurred before, with this expansion of technology and the access to concrete knowledge and any teachings that are shared in this great growing arena field. So Master DK tells us that a physical plane analogy may help here, and we use this in the teachings, especially in healing. The eye is one of our major senses, that whereby we acquire knowledge, a medium through which we see. We, however, do not make the mistake of regarding the eye itself as a source of light, which it is not, and as that which produces revelation. We know it is an instrument which is responding to certain light vibrations, waves, different frequencies, different rhythms, whereby certain information is conveyed anent the physical plane to our brain, that great receiving plate upon the physical plane. To the soul, the mind acts also as an eye or a window through which information comes, but it is not itself the source of light or illumination. Now, with this growing fascination with this whole arena of artificial intelligence, I think it's really important that we recognize what we are feeding our minds and be able to utilize in the triple light, in the technique of light, to create a high level of discernment. And then once the information is noted, found, and then discriminating that which is useful, that which can create a deeper and higher connection. And this may be unique to each individual, because the ray technology, I'll call it, the technology of the rays, which is a science in its infancy, that we're very cautious and careful, knowing that the cyclic expansion and development of the centers and of the mind occurs under the influence of the rays, and that we still are learning and will learn more as we move into the Aquarian age about the interactions and the interconnections and the way in which these influences flow into humanity as a whole and into the One World Serving Group. Therefore, we work with the technique of light to eliminate any criticism, any judgment, any way of looking at knowledge, what lands on that sensitive plate, in a way that does not serve humanity. And remembering the purpose for which humanity exists, The objective before the group of world mystics and workers and the ideal set before the individual aspirant are the same as in the individual meditation. And what are those again? The achieving of that focused attention and mental quiet. For it is there wherein reality can be contacted. The true and the beautiful can be registered. Divine purpose can be recorded, and it becomes possible to transmit to the phenomenal form upon the physical plane the needed energy whereby the subjective realization can be materialized. So as we prepare for these incoming ideas, we prepare ourselves in a non-separative fashion, coming together as a group knowing that soul is group. So in all occult work and mental matter which has to manifest upon the physical plane and thus achieve objectivity, man, that is humanity, has to work as a unit. Each of us and also as soul. It infers the ability, therefore, of the lower threefold man to be subordinated to the ego, the soul, so that the dynamic will of the ego may be imposed upon the physical brain. The method of the man on the physical plane who's engaged in conscious work and mental matter is to be considered in two divisions, and that first is the initial process of alignment with the ego, so that the plan, purpose, and method of achievement may be impressed upon the physical brain. We have read this before, but today the emphasis is on this alignment, aligning with the soul as we do when we meet. And yet to remember, as Master DK says, all that is possible for any of us, for him in particular in relation to his teachings, is to grope for those feeble words which will somewhat clothe the thought. As those words clothe it, they limit it, they limit the thought. And he says he's guilty of creating new prisoners who must ultimately be released. All books are prison houses of ideas. And only when speech and writing are superseded by telepathic communication and by intuitive interplay will the plan and the technique of its expression be grasped in a clear fashion. He says he now talks in symbols and he manipulates words in order to create a certain impression. I construct a thought form which, when dynamic enough, can impress the brain of a transmitting agent, such as yourself. But as I do so, I know well how much must be left unrelated and how seldom it is possible to do more than point out a cosmology, macrocosmic or microcosmic, which will suffice to convey a temporary picture of divine reality. And so as we prepare to really consider the rules of thought, we need to step outside of our books, outside of the world of words that's actually right now being created for us through the internet and all the access that we have, And it's creating a new lexicon, a new vocabulary, kind of a new dictionary for us to relate to. And yet to hold the fact that these are still those feeble words clothing thoughts, and that we are impressed by these. The brain is impressed as the transmitting agent. But let's discipline ourselves to always stand at that higher point as the soul and move through the words, the paragraphs, the expression, into and behind them to the true thought that might be found, particularly as we will become more and more exposed to ideas that are coming to help us move to this path of assisting in the externalization of the hierarchy. So we know that a new dispensation is coming and that we must discipline ourselves and our thought processes and work as one in group, not as group think, but in group mind. And remember what DK tells us, what is thought? It's a dynamic energy that manifests differently across planes, governed by cosmic laws of the evolution of consciousness. Any thought is dynamic energy, which we manifest on some plane. Etheric, astral, concrete mental, abstract mental, and Buddhic, which are truly, as we are told, one, and yet, in order to begin to understand, we separate. Ellen.
We are given 3 techniques to develop and use light of brain, mind, soul, and presence to bring about control of the personality. Dispelling illusion through discrimination. Mental. Dissipation of glamour with dispassion. Freedom from the astral plane. And devitalizing of Maya with indifference, which is freedom from the effects of Maya of the etheric physical plane. And these produce the dispelling through focused light, the dissipating potency of distributed light, and the directing power of light energy.
So he's giving us the 3 mechanisms of light in these techniques that we are combining: focused light, distributed light, and a directing power of light energy that comes through from the highest. All involve will. So briefly, let's read about the technique of indifference. Donna?
The technique of indifference renders ineffective or neutralizes the hold of a substance over the life or spirit functioning in the three worlds. For soul is the evidence of life. By means of excuse me, by means of this technique, Maya is ended. For the control of the purified astral vehicle is consciously and technically brought into activity, producing the freeing of the energies of the etheric body from the control of matter or force substance, and bringing men in large numbers onto the probationary path. Where there is divine indifference to the call or pull of matter, then inspiration becomes possible. This technique is related to karma yoga in its most practical form and the use of matter with complete impersonality. The goal of this technique is the first initiation, which enables man to live a life inspired by God. Inspiration is the applied power of transmission. Glamour, a world problem.
So this gives us a kind of criteria, actually, in terms of our own ability to work with and embody this technique of indifference. Reflect on it for your own practice. Particularly for those of us who are working in groups, aiming to bring soul consciousness into humanity's consciousness. Divine indifference, this pull of matter, is what enables the first initiation, the birth, to live a life inspired by God. Lifting the consciousness on the astral plane to the highest level of the astral plane, where the astral permanent atom is located. And it is this astral field that we then are clearing in the technique of light. Frida, are you able to read?
Yes, I think so. The technique of light is more closely related to the mind and signifies the method whereby the illumination, which flows from the soul, whose nature is light, can irradiate not only ideas but life, circumstances, and events, revealing the cause and the meaning of experience. When the power of the disciple to illumine is grasped, he has taken the first step towards dispelling glamour, and just as the technique of the presence becomes effective upon the mental plane, so this technique produces powers which can become effective on the astral plane and eventually bring about dissipation and the disappearance of that plane.
This is, in my own experience, what brought me to consider watching the thoughts, my thoughts, and being in the presence of the thoughts that are expressed by others in a different relationship to those thoughts. Because the thoughts that are expressed by others in a group, even in a passing exchange, are not for me. It is not that I respond to the thoughts. The field that we're in, that presence of interchange, whatever the platform is, and we are all on these platforms, whether it's the platform of a family gathering or the platform of what we are gathered here, using technology today. We're on a platform. We're on that. Hopefully, we're standing on that receiving plate, and we're all there receiving this transmission, but it is not a transmission for us alone. It is a transmission for a larger plate, if we're to use DK's terminology. And to link this to what's emerging now, all these new, what we would call locations on this plate of mind of humanity that are being sounded, being transmitted in some form, usually using images and words. And in the technology world, they say algorithms, these formulas. Recognize that when we're using what Master Dwell Kul calls formulas, these techniques, we are using those mechanisms of light, and to be able to stand as the observer is a critical function for each one of us. The development of the faculty of mind control so that the thinker grips and holds steady the mental processes and learns to regard the mind as the interpreter of the states of consciousness, as the transmitter of egoic intent to the physical brain, and as the window through which the ego, the real man, looks out upon vast and, to the majority, unknown fields of knowledge. The will aspect of the egoic life, the soul life, begins to influence the disciple upon the path of discipleship and of preparation for initiation, though through an effort to grasp and understand the higher aspects of this mental process. And as I listened to people read what is being written, it comes forth to me that so many are really trying to understand the higher aspects of this mental process. And through our meditation, as DK told us earlier in one of the readings we did today, this is something we do as a mirror of meditation. So let's pause here. I'm going to pause the recording, and let's find out, how are we using these techniques consciously? If anyone would like to share their experience, what's going on right now, I'll find the recording button and pause. So we're trying a little experiment, and we're going to ask people who are online today to share what they heard in the sharing, not what they said, so that we come up with an impersonality in relation to our collective conscious use of the techniques.
What I heard from one of the participants was that as she recognizes that the soul is speaking through others in conversations that she has, she tries to give attention to each word that the person says and not attach a story to it, but allow it to stand on its own and the message from it to come forth. Paying attention to each word focuses her mind on the essence of what's coming through and takes her mind away from her own responses, which can get in the way.
What I heard is the importance of recognizing the presence of soul in another and having an exchange of thoughts be heart to heart. There was more, but that was the salient point that I'm taking away.
Margie, would you add anything to what has been expressed?
No, I just totally agree. In moments of listening and being silent and hearing what the soul has to say from another person. Over.
Thank you. So let us assume the attitude of the observer, as we did when we began. Linking to the highest. And sound the mantra of the will as the will is involved in each of the techniques. Martine, will you lead us, please?
In the center of the will of God I stand. Naught shall deflect my will from God's will. I implement that will by love. I turn towards the field of service. I, the triangle divine, work out that will within the square and serve humanity.
So ultimately, we're concerned with this battle between the dweller on the threshold and the angel of the presence, with a great point of crisis which faces the disciple when attempting to resolve the final pairs of opposites prior to certain major initiations. And this is a confronting the personality by the angel of the presence. So through these three techniques, especially as we begin to combine them, and as the observer notice the impact and the way in which the angel of the presence begins to hover over and dispel those elements, devitalize the elements, and dissipate the elements of the dweller. We are constantly, if we choose the upward path, preparing ourselves for that battle. And this is just a reminder, we've read this before. The two aspects in man can only meet in full power and with intention and finality when no illusion can no longer control the mind, when glamour has lost all power to veil, and when the forces of Maya can no longer hinder. So we're practicing and preparing for this battle, which leads us to the point of these 5 recognitions that are achieved after the third initiation. So the result of the winning of the battle, the personality remains, it still exists, but it is seen no more as of old. The light of the angel envelops it. The burning ground has done its work, and the personality then is nothing more or less than a purified shell or form through which the light, the radiance, the quality, and the characteristics of the angel can shine. It's a fusion of the lights with the stronger and the more powerful, obliterating the lesser. That's the goal. So reminding ourselves of the result of following the technique of the presence, which we are just beginning to tiptoe into in this use of the three techniques. That enables the intuition to flow in and to supersede the activity of the rationalizing mind. And this practice that was mentioned of listening to the words, each word, and being present to the soul of the other or others in the conversation, is this practice of the presence. It is enabling then the intuition to flow in, superseding that story-making activity of the rationalizing mind. And that eventually for us it dispels that illusion. All the stories that have been written and gathered over eons, the story of mankind, which is the emotional history of the Akashic record, that each of us have a part in, and that part we are devitalizing, dissipating, and dispelling. So the masters are involved in use their mind or the mind for two activities: to reach the minds of the disciples and attract aspirants through the medium of an instrument that is similar to the disciples' mind, and to create thought forms on concrete levels which can embody these divine ideas. And this is this transference, the translation from hierarchy through these thought forms, embodying these divine ideas. And the directing agent, the angel of the presence, produces then the power to create in this manner. And this we call the result of intuition. So this, for me, just encapsulates this whole process that we are beginning as humanity and as the World Serving Group to enter into in this beginning unfoldment of the Aquarian age. And we are, many of us are being, some are being sort of plummeted with ideas, and people have become almost frozen in a particular state of mind because there's so much. So in our role, how can we stand, as was mentioned, stand and listen to each word as the observer, focus on the soul consciousness that is coming through, and begin to develop the intuitive capacity to respond appropriately. And I'm repeating again that there's no line of demarcation, no lines, but constant overlapping, cyclic development. And this process of fusion is confusing for people. So let us use the techniques advisedly and not not let the horses out of the corral before before it's time. I think is my silly way of saying it, but maybe you have ways of expressing that. How do we keep things in context, developing the power to be of service to humanity, and also contact the higher spheres of divine activity? I'm going to pause and see if we have any thoughts about that you'd like to share with the group. All right, but if anyone wants to take an attempt, we don't need to summarize what was shared, but it seems that we are attempting to use the techniques and be aware of them consciously. So let's enter into silence as we contemplate our entry into these new environments as individuals and as members of the new group of world servers, the One Serving Group. And this is just an attempt to put in the framework of the constitution of man, how the disciplines apply, and where the power is focused. You may think about how to utilize, for example, the technique of light in relation to the glamours that emerge through the sense of psychometry related to sensitivity, the emotions. In this expanding field that we call this field of the integration of artificial intelligence into sort of continuous development of new algorithms, it's affecting the psychometry, the sensitivity, and is touching the emotions of many. And yet, we're really going to need to invoke a higher light to deal with the illusions that are part of the planetary psychometry. And we'll look at that in greater depth next week, this idea of planetary psychometry. And this is just a reminder of the correlation, you might say, of the cyclic development and how it correlates to the initiations. So we center ourselves again. And let us enter into a beam together, a beam of directed, focused light. Uniting as a group, revealing a greater light, and illumining the way to the center of the light, directing our way. Using the sign of the Cross of Divinity, we sound the protective formula. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. Now we merge with the group present and bring into the consciousness on that clear, silent plate of the group mind. We bring in the current service groups and envision the light growing, connecting the heart, mind, and heart in the head, and using the Ajna center, the light to this great plate, expanding field of light as we sound the mantram of light. Radiance we are in power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour, maya, and illusion. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. And just repeating what we had said before, this process of alignment with the soul and using alignment with the soul of all, the one soul, in order that we may touch and be impressed from the highest point and begin to intuitively know that touch of the presence. And then, with a secondary process using the physical brain consciously, we proceed to carry out the plan, construct through will and purpose the necessitated form, and then, having built and energized the form, we keep our eye on it, the spiritual eye. This process of energizing so that we are disciplining the mind to use the eye of the soul. For just as the human eye, that faculty of control and recognition, becomes the spiritual eye in all of our encounters, in all of our thoughts. So before we close, we're going to prepare ourselves for conversations next week, remembering that we don't need to be hampered by what we consider our feeble attempts to share our thoughts. But let's look at how Master DK defines a rule or rules. Frida, are you able to read for us the definition of the rules?
The rules are, however, different from laws of order. They are the result of tried experience and of age-long undertakings, and assuming neither the form of laws nor the limitations of a command. They are recognized by those for whom they exist, and hence evoke from them a prompt, intuitive response. They need no enforcement, but are voluntarily accepted, and are put to trial in the belief that the witness of the past and the testimony of the ages warrant the effort required for the expressed requirements, the raise and the initiations.
So these are the rules of thought recognized by us and evoke from us a prompt, intuitive response so that we voluntarily accept them. So as we move forward together, remember these simple rules will lay right foundations for the carrying forward of the magical work and will render the mental body so clear and so powerful that right motive will control and true work in building will be possible. So let's look briefly. And he says, these rules may sound too simple for the learned aspirant, but for those who are willing to become as little children, they will be found to be a safe guide into truth and will eventually make them able to pass the tests of the fourth initiation. Some are couched in terms symbolic, others are necessarily blinds. Still others express the truth just as it is. So as we move forward, beginning next Saturday, we will look at the rules and we're going to take time and pause. I'd like for each of us to really consider the first 3 rules this week, and we'll read them. We won't pause today, but we'll develop sort of a little criteria for ourselves to approach it as a meditative experiment, to become as little children, and to begin to integrate what we've been told will be coming to us in the future. It will be, I'll clarify the date with everyone. I think I've changed the whole series to be on Saturdays because I can no longer do Sundays. So let's look at the first of the 15 rules. View the world of thought and separate the false out of the true. So that will be the first rule and the first sort of meditative focus. How are we equipping ourselves to view the world of thought? What are we experimenting with? How, and what other questions? How do we separate the false out of the true? Learn the meaning of illusion, and in its midst, locate the golden thread of truth. And I'll send these 3 out to everyone in a separate email and post it in the description on the YouTube recording. With the way DK defines illusion, and We can add our own definitions as well and other definitions of illusion. And controlling the body of emotion for the waves that rise upon the stormy seas of life engulf the swimmer, shut out the sun, and render all plans futile. So if we go back to the earlier instruction, no, I'm going two different directions and I apologize. I can do this. I know I can. They seem simple. But they will render the mental body so clear and so powerful that right motive will control and true work in building will be possible. And this is it. They exist. They evoke from us a prompt, intuitive response. Back up one more. And these are symbolic. I can't remember where that was. But, you know, some are expressed symbolically. So this is the close of today's meeting in August, and our next meeting is in September. I know what it was. We were going to every other week. So we'll talk amongst ourselves related to then when the next meeting will be, and we'll consult those who may want to join us. This recording will be up, and what I'd like to do is stop the share and let's go back to the very first beginning mantram to close today, to put us in a framework for our meditative process around these first three rules. Now let's see, what am I doing? Share. And let's play from the current slide. So I would ask that as we close today, you begin your consideration of those first three rules of thought and not press yourself to go any further, but try to incorporate your experiences throughout the week in the context of this particular mantra. And let's just sound it. Desha, would you sound this for us in closing today?
Mhm. I am a point of light within a greater light. I am a strand of loving energy within the stream of love divine. I am a point of sacrificial fire, focused within the fiery will of God. And thus I stand. I am a way by which men may achieve. I am a source of strength, enabling them to stand. I am a beam of light shining upon their way and thus I stand. And standing thus, revolve, and tread this way the ways of men, and know the ways of God. And thus I stand.